Okay, so what we've been doing is we've been putting this piece together. This is a mouthpiece that's a one direction Hans Rudolph mouthpiece. So you're going to have air coming in this spot and leaving this spot, and it's a closed system so that hopefully everything that we are expiring when Jen's doing this assessment is going to be assessed through this tube and into the machine behind me. And so we're able to compare that to what the environmental air is and the composition of oxygen and carbon dioxide, so that when we are measuring that comparison, we can see if he consumed this much oxygen and then produced this much carbon dioxide. So we can determine what that would be at each stage of the intensity that we're moving with every 2 minutes. And then at the end, when she stops because she's extremely tired, we can see where her heart rate responded for each increase in the stage, and then say this is where you kind of crossed over from aerobic to anaerobic metabolism, utilizing more carbohydrates than fats and so on. So that's kind of where that information will come from, and it'll be kind of over here on the screen. I'm going to just lock this in right here. So we're using like this camera that has like an auto tracking piece, and so yeah, anyway, it's kind of our first time doing the live stream thing actually live. So all right, so Jen's going to have this little headpiece on and also a heart rate monitor. So she's got a heart rate monitor that she will put right below the xiphoid process, and it'll be tight enough that it's not constricting, but it's also not going to fall down or slip down when she's running. And then she's also going to make sure that the inside of it, if you've ever used a polar heart rate monitor, it's got a little bit of a rubber piece to it. That's where the sensing is going to be for that. It needs to be a little wet. And so she's wet that down a little bit, put that on, and is tightening that up right now. Can you help with that? Yeah, I got it. Okay. All right. And then, so we'll have the heart rate being assessed through that. And then we'll have her wear this little headpiece. Sorry, I'm gonna put some of your ponytails right there. Okay. All right. So, do you have your mouthpiece? Okay, awesome. So if you want to, we've got a little mouthpiece and a nose plug. So you will put that mouthpiece onto the end. If you can.
And this plug is to make sure that you're capturing all the air.
Exactly. So with this setup, you are trying to have the person's mouth breathe only. Yep. If you have the nose plug, that kind of prevents them from inspiring or expiring in through the nose or out through the nose. I'm going to go and grab one thing. If we're doing the cardio coach, which is going to be another way to assess this, it's just another machine. This gives you like a rubberized mask. So this gives you a rubberized mask and allows the individual to breathe through the nose or the mouth, which works pretty good.
Oh yeah.
But the machine, as you'll see if you come back, I think it's in August when we're doing the cardio coach, or maybe it's in May, I can't quite remember. Schedule offhand. This just gives you heart rate, oxygen consumption, and doesn't necessarily give you the CO2 and VO2 that you'd be consuming and producing. So this is going to give you better information for determining like that ventilatory threshold and where the individual should be targeting their training so that they can improve. The other one gives you just like heart rate and oxygen consumption. And unfortunately, we don't have a similar type of mask set up for the higher powered machine. So that's kind of why we're doing what we're doing. Yeah. Looks good. Yep.
Yeah.
So respiratory exchange ratio, we need twice here.
Yeah, we can determine respiratory exchange ratio with this machine. And so we are going to plug this in kind of through the holder, and then Jen is going to have that there. You need this like slid a little bit. Okay, so yeah, this headpiece can then. How's that feel? Is it too tight? Just right there. Okay. So then we'll tighten that up so that that's not going anywhere. Okay. And then you have the nose piece. Yep, perfect. So there we go, we're ready to go. Then we have to take the tube here that will connect to the gas sampler piece here. Oh, and one thing I should probably tell you is in order. So these are little filters that we have as well. That will have to be switched in between each participant if we're running a whole bunch of tests. So I'm going to switch this out because I don't know when number 3 was used last.
Yeah, that was a question that I had about maintenance, specifically cleaning.
Yep.
So if you have a bunch of participants, do you
Yep.
have to clean all that equipment between
Yep.
participants?
Yeah, we end up cleaning the mouthpiece and all of that. We have multiple setups of those, and so we use those obviously once per person, and it takes about 35 minutes to clean for the whole sanitization cleaning process for that to happen. So we typically can run individuals pretty well through here in about 30-minute time frame. So yeah, if we were going to be doing like 4 hours of testing, we can run about 8 students or 8 participants through, which works pretty well if you have enough people to do all the sanitizing and things like that.
Got it.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a little filter here that we're putting in to the heating mechanism that will warm the air that's being expired, and then we've got this little arm that will hold on to the expired air. So it's that way, and then we connect to the exhale portion. Okay. There we go. That. Okay, and so I've already plugged in Jen's information, which I can show you after the test is complete, of what this will look like. Does it need to be a little more check? How's that? Is that a little better? Is that okay? Okay, take this up just a little bit. All right, so the assessment that we're picking is a modified Balke, so we're going to start at a speed of 5.5 miles an hour, and then we're going to go from 0% grade up to the end, whatever that is, for her. She's going to end on her own volition, which is completely gassed. And she's going to go up just in incline by 2.5% grade every 2 minutes. And so typically I will do that manually, but for this video, I'm going to have that pre-programmed into the computer so that the computer will actually run the treadmill here. So are you ready to go? Yeah, feeling okay? Okay. Just a couple of things. When you are done, do as you're doing right now, just straddle the tread, and then I'll make sure everything stops, and we'll figure that out. I do want to have, since you are running this for the first time in a bit, I do want to have you keep everything on, and we'll do like 2 minutes of recovery. So I'll just hit the cool down, and then you'll just kind of lock it out from there. Yep. And once, yep. So there's a heart rate dial that's going to be on the arm here of the treadmill. We're just making sure that that's going to be measuring the heart rate before we get too far down the testing rabbit hole. So, okay. So you're ready to go, because the treadmill is going to start once everything is normalized for your breath. Good? All right. Okay, so right now we're zeroing the flow, getting a baseline of gas exchange for Jen when she's at rest. You could add more pieces to this if you were interested in taking blood pressure during this assessment, things like that nature. But we're just going to do this for overall V02 assessment, and she's not at risk for any heart conditions or high blood pressure.
So if you were doing a stress test, you would have like an electrocardiograph hooked up to her?
Yep, so you can add ECG to this. We don't, for our purposes in this case, but for this video, because we're mainly looking at V02. But yeah, you could have like a 12-lead ECG going on with this if you were in the more clinical side, looking at someone that had a heart attack and you wanted to see what their heart was doing.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So it looks like you're normalizing pretty good. Ready to go? Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. We are beginning. And the heart rate is. And so we'll ramp it up to 5 miles an hour. And it's like that fun jog. We're going for all the Black Friday deals, not sprinting, but we're also not walking and doing a quick walk. So okay, so right now, that is at a heart rate of 118 and an RER of 0.71. So if you look at the data on your RER, the exchange ratio, should be utilizing a greater amount of fat right now compared to carbs. But as we continue to increase the intensity, we'd expect that RER to get closer to 1.
Yep.
For a true V02 Max assessment, going to maximum, that would be a number where the RER would be 1.1 or greater. So we're looking at that as kind of a measure for termination and incredible.
Got it.
Right now for VO2 in milliliters per kilogram per minute, it's 27.6. And she has been exercising for a total time of 1 minute and 20 seconds. So that is going to be about 35 seconds now until she is moving to the next stage, which will have an increase in that percent grade that will occur every 2 minutes. Your heart rate is at 150. With your vision, nice job. If I wasn't live streaming this, I'd be playing a lot of music and getting Jen into this really pumped up stage. I will still be cheering her on, even though we're live streaming from the beginning to the class and verbal push. If you go in, because it can be quite stressful for you to involve. Right, so we've moved to the stage 2. Again, we're going up every 2 minutes by 2.5%. The computer has controlled the Balke Treadmill and increased that to the 2.5% grade and the 5.5 miles per hour where she's going. She had a slight increase in her heart rate, now at 156. And her VO2 is climbing. It's at 34.1 currently in this transition time between stage 1 and stage 2. We're trying to get her to a steady state heart rate response and oxygen consumption response, and then we'll increase the rest of that stage after we get that steady state. So her respiratory exchange ratio is now at 0.82. They're getting into a little bit more of a blend between carbohydrates and fats, and we estimate substrate for oxygen usage and for ATP production.
Does the speed of the treadmill increase or just the?
In this protocol, we are not increasing the speed. We're keeping that steady and just increasing the grade. But if, depending on the protocol that you use, you can have speed and grade both modified. You can even come up with your own. If you maybe have a specific athlete that doesn't want to run on, say, ever increasing grade, you just want to have them on a flat surface, and you just increase the speed, you can do that too. There are again a number of protocols that you will utilize. The one that I'm utilizing is again a modified Balke, where we're keeping the speed consistent and just increasing the grade. So, yeah. So right now, Jen is at 161 for her heart rate. 160, and she has a VO2 of 35.4, and her RER is at 0.86. And she's at 4 minutes, and now we're increasing up to 5% grade. Good, how you feeling? On a scale of 6 to 20 is a board scale. 14? 14? Yeah. Okay. So she said she's at a 14 right now, so she's working decently hard. If you're looking at the work scale, this is kind of what that looks like. Look okay, but she's kind of somewhere in this area where it's somewhat hard, not quite heavy or hard.
Right.
We hopefully get her at least another 4 minutes of exercise, get past kind of that 8-minute mark to get a true VO2 max before she ends. If it's too quick, that she might not actually get to that steady state. If it's too long, she might become fatigued just from exercising, not necessarily due to that lack of oxygen. It could be due to, muscles that are actually being from that. So, she's at a V02 now, 39.9 milliliters per kilogram per minute, heart rate of 168. The estimated heart rate max for her is 180. So, we're kind of in that higher heart rate for the estimate percentage wise. And her RER is at 0.91. Yeah, so, yeah, sorry, what was your question for him?
I'm always saying it's moving up.
Okay, yeah. Nice job, man. Keep it going, keep it going. Looking good. Looking good. You are 15 seconds away from the next stage, going up to 7.5. Nice work. Keep jogging. Keep those legs moving. Keep those knees up. Once you start to get a little bit more in elevation, it's really important to keep those knees up so that you're not having to keep right a little bit. But you're doing awesome. Heart rate's looking good. Breathing's looking good. Getting closer to that RER of 1 and a 0.92. You're at 40.6 milliliters per kilogram per minute, which is really great. Not according to the normative table, but just according to our current testing. Nice job, nice job. Keep it up, keep it up. We're at 171. Nice job, nice job. Way to work, way to work, way to work. Looking good, looking good, looking good. We're at 41.2, your V02. Nice job, nice job, nice job. Keep the arms relaxed. Yeah, there you go, there you go. Keep breathing. Doing well, doing well. Nice job, nice job. Right, you're 1 minute through that stage. You got 1 minute left in this stage. You for sure got another stage. For sure. You got it. Nice job, nice job, nice job, nice job. So if you're taking more assessment pieces, like if we cared about the RER at the end of each stage, I'd be asking for that before the stage change to the next elevation. I'd also maybe be taking blood pressure or reporting information from the ECG if we have the full clinical side of things.
So it records this information in real time?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
So the program records the information in real time?
I'm sorry, the treadmill's running a little bit. Can you say that one more time?
So the program records the information in real time?
Oh, yes, yes, sorry. Yes, it does record the information in real time. It is kind of separating it out in 15-second chunks and taking
Got it
for that for each of the different lines. And I'll show you what that looks like at the end of the test. We're now increasing in our incline at currently at 8 minutes. So Jen's going to be running at a 10 grade now and 5.5 miles an hour still. She's at an RER of 0.99, so getting close to that fully reliant estimated, right, on glycolysis and the carbohydrate usage for that substrate. And for VO2 is at 43.0, just going up to 45.4, and her heart rate is at 175. So getting really close to that estimated heart rate max. Keep it up, Jen. Nice job, nice job, nice job. Keep those knees up, keep those legs moving. You're doing awesome. You're doing awesome. Nice work, nice work. You got it, you got it, you got it. So now I'm also gonna, as we get closer to the end, gonna start putting a hand as kind of like a stop gate behind her so that she doesn't fall off the track.
Yep.
She's going. Nice job, Jen. You're at 1.02. Keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. RER is looking good. Good job, good job, good job. You're at 43.1 for your V02 Max. Nice job, nice job. Keep it up, keep it up, keep it up, keep it up. You can do it, you can do it, you can do it. You got it. You got it. You got it. 45 seconds. You got it. Come on, come on, come on. Nice work, nice work, nice work, nice work, nice work, nice work, nice work. 48.2 for your V02. Nice job, nice job, nice job, nice job. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Come on, come on. 30 seconds, time on the stage. You got it, you got it, you got it, you got it. Way to work, way to work, way to work, way to work, way to work. Nice, 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 nice. Come on, come on, come on. You got it, 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 you got it. Good job, good job, good job, good job, good job, good job. The leg movement, nice job, nice job, nice job, nice job. You can do it, you can do it, you can do it, you got 15 seconds left. We're gonna end at the end of this one, okay, on. Keep it up, 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 keep it up. Nice, 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 okay, go ahead and straddle it. There you go, I'm going to do a pull down here, nice job. Okay, so your estimated heart rate max was 179. The max heart rate that you achieved was 179. Way to be. So you're at an RER of 1.08 right now 1.1. So I would say that this is a valid test because she got to that 1.1 RER, got to the estimated heart rate max, actually hit it right on the nose, and the time of exercise that she finished at was 10 minutes. So all of those different pieces are kind of leading me to the conclusion that this was a valid V02 Max test score, or a valid V02 peak test, I guess we should say, because we haven't done this on other modes like rowing or cycling or anything of that nature. So the peak VO2 that she was able to achieve on the treadmill was a 47.8 that was recorded, 47.8 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram per minute for her. And so we could use that data, compare her to other females that would be in that same age bracket, and see where she kind of ranks in relation to cardiorespiratory fitness. So so right now we've been resting for about a minute and a half. Is the cool down too cool? All right, so we'll do 30 more seconds. And then what I'll do is I'll stop the test. We'll take off all of the machinery. If you're interested in kind of seeing what the sanitization looks like, I can bring you over to the desk a little bit, or the cleaning station. But really it's cleaning it with soap and water and then throwing it into a sanitizing solution, letting it soak for 30 minutes and then rinsing that out and letting it dry. So you do that with any of the contact points with the individual. So you do that with all of the mouthpiece, the hospital portion, the contact points for the headgear, the nose piece would also be included in that, and then we sanitize this tube that we're collecting here as well. How are you doing? Ready to take off the stuff? Okay, I'm going to end the test, and then we're going to. We've added it successfully, and then we'll do a next report. Okay, so I'm going to got all this for you. You can still do this. It's okay. Yeah, so I don't know if you saw all the spit that was being collected, but it's so this is not a beauty pageant type of assessment.
Right.
So be careful.
No, yeah.
I don't know if you can see that, but that's all the spit.
Wow.
That was calculated from this. In the mask one, where it's for the nose and mouth, there isn't as much phlegm or spit that's being kicked up because you're not going only through the mouth. So there's actually very little.
Right.
And so really just hoping that the seal around the face stays. With this one, it's all about like keeping that contact with the mouthpiece as you're going through. So how do you feel?
I feel excellent. Of course, I think keeping in mind, like Brandon, if you're ever, anybody who's watching this, wherever, to do this with a client or participant, most people don't train normally just breathing through a breathing mask.
Right.
So that in itself can produce some physical and mental anxiety, I'd say. So getting them comfortable and prompting them before even letting them walk around and see what it feels like to just breathe out of that, because that does throw you off a little bit. And of course, when you're on the treadmill and somebody's cheering you on, you always think you have like an extra 10 seconds left, but I was also imagining throwing up into the mask. So I knew, as an endurance athlete myself, I knew how to push that. You might have other people who like, oh, my legs are hurting a little, so I'm gonna quit, right? So that it's hard to get them to think like, no, you need to go till you feel like you can't continue anymore. I think that's a little bit of a psychological game.
And the other thing with that is like, if you looked at the data, you could tell if someone was kind of cheating themselves on the data, like, oh, they got tired. Yeah, but you
Right.
had a little bit more physiologically speaking, according to some of the data that we were seeing in the
Right.
paper. But Jen did a great
So I-
job with that 1.1 RER. She hit her estimated heart rate max like right on the nose. So like each of those different pieces that you'd see in the ACSM handbook that would say this is a valid test, the criteria were met for that. You basically did that. So we'd then be able to interpret that data with at least a little bit more certainty that what we're prescribing from this is going to be great. Or should be great. And by prescription, I mean like exercise only. I'm not prescribing anything else other than here where the intensities would be if you're wanting to improve on your aerobic performance, anaerobic performance, or somewhere in between that. So
Right. So I noticed you essentially counted her down, 30 more seconds, 15 more seconds.
yep.
Do you generally do that when you sense that someone is sort of reaching the end of what the test should be, or do you let them determine that? Or, I think you mentioned if you're trying to get to 1.1 RER,
Yep.
would that be where you would just say, okay, we're good?
Yeah. Well, so if they still are able to run, they're the one running the show. I though knew she had about 2 minutes left just from the RER value going from that 0.99 crossing over that 1, because then you're becoming anaerobic. If you look at the time frame of that, glycolysis on its own, if it's more anaerobic, can only last about 2 minutes. And so if you had about one more stage in her when she had kind of gotten to that point. And so I was really trying to just coach her through that full 2 minute stage that she could get to, and hopefully then get to that 1.1. So if they don't get to 1.1, it's okay. It may be part of the training, part of a mental thing, but going more than 2 minutes after they cross that 1.0 RER is something I wouldn't expect for them, just based off of what we know from the bioenergetics metabolic system, which one's making most of the ATP for that activity. It's now more anaerobic. So yeah.
And do you ever have
Oh, go ahead.
do you ever have people go above 1.1?
Yeah, yep. You can have people that are like hyperventilating so much that they're having above that 1.1 value. It's just making sure that they try and get to that as the threshold for a valid test. Like they can go above that if they're still able to and everything else is looking fine. But it wouldn't be for very long because again, just based metabolically, they don't have huge reserves of that metabolism to keep making ATP required for that high intensity.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there are going to be, people who don't push it, and then there are going to be people who maybe push it too far. I certainly know people like that. That would try to win this test.
Yep.
Right. Right.
And I'll say just from like the 10 plus years I've been doing this, it's like 12 years now. Nobody beats the test. Like there's still another stage. If you're doing it right, you actually don't want to go super long in time. You want to try and get them in that spot where physiologically they can't consume any more oxygen. And so that then brings up the question, well, what's the appropriate protocol for them that they're actually hitting that? Because I've had it before where, it's a really highly trained cross-country skier. Those people have huge V02s, right? And when you decide on a protocol, you're like, oh yeah, this one should be good. It gets most people to that. Like I had one person go like 18 minutes. Well, that was too long. That was the wrong protocol that I chose because they didn't get to that point around 12. So I had to retest them on a more intense type of step and then got them around that 10-minute to 11-minute phase where they actually fatigued metabolically speaking because of that, not because they were like exercising for so long. So yeah, that comes with experience too. Like when you're in the lab, that you can kind of figure out where people are at beforehand to then inform that that protocol. And I'd actually asked Jen, well, what do you normally run pretty well for like 45 minutes? So she gave me the speed that she was running at, and I said, okay, well, we'll be a little bit less than that, because with that stepwise progression in incline, people aren't used to running on an incline for that long. Exactly. So that's why,
Right.
that's kind of why I chose the protocol I did. So,
Right.
yeah.
And then a question about safety. The first time I heard about how a V02 Max test is performed, someone is saying, well, you have to have a catcher. They're like, well, what's a catcher? Well, it's the person who stands behind the runner to catch the runner when they fall off the treadmill.
Yep.
I noticed you put your hand there behind her when it was getting sort of late stage. But is there, like, can you talk about the safety protocols a little bit?
Yeah. So I guess we should talk about this before she even gets onto this. There are contraindications for doing a maximum test that I would have to make sure she doesn't have, right? So she doesn't have like chest pain that's uncontrolled. If she has any sort of like health risks, cardiovascular risks that are then leading into that, like I suspect any of those different like claudications, that's going to be a relative contraindication. So if it's worth the data that I would get from her, I may do it. But if it's not worth it, I'm not going to do it, right? So you'd want to go through that ACSM guidelines for testing to make sure that the individual's safe enough to do the test before you would put them on here.
Yep.
After you've done that, then while you're doing the test, then you would say, yeah, I'm going to make sure, like, I'm very present. I don't know if you noticed, but I wasn't going over to the computer after she went to stage 4, because I could see from the data, she's going to get she's getting near the end, other than like possibly a trip and fall. Like before that point, it wasn't really like, oh, you're getting really tired. But after she hit 14, and then I was assuming you were probably about 18 in that last stage, like I'm gonna stick close to her, or I would have another person be there to be the catcher. So the hand on the back was like, and it wasn't actually on the back, it was just like based on her gait, if she came back anymore, she would fall off. So this is kind of like the stop point that I would have her in, right? And so if she got to that point, or then started to like trip and fall, I would have had the other hand to catch her and make sure she didn't actually like, damage herself, damage the equipment, mainly get her own, right? That's the most important. But yeah, like pulling things out of where it's supposed to be. So, yeah, I was.
Have you ever had anybody fall off?
I'm sorry.
Have you ever had anybody fall off the treadmill?
I've had to catch people, yeah.
Okay.
I've had to catch people. And you're just having to be aware of what's going on. If you see, like, you probably heard this, I was telling her to make sure that the knees are up,
Yep. Yes.
If it gets a little bit too high, and then you start seeing like the knee drop and the leaning forward, that's like a sign that they're getting so close to the end, and they're also going to be increasing the risk of falling. So,
Right. Right.
And sometimes people are like, one person I had was trying to use the handrails to then help straddle, and they missed one of the handrails, and so I basically was there to catch them for that. So it might not even be that they're so tired, it's just like a mishap that's happening from naturally trying to dismount.
Right.
And I think too, just from my own personal experience and also seeing people do this, there's going to be a difference in a person who's comfortable on the treadmill and knows that they're maybe going to fall, but be okay with it and be like, I know what to do, compared to somebody who's like, I have never run at 18% and 5.5. They're already psyched out themselves a little bit. So the spatial awareness is not there. So I think also knowing your clients, like, oh, Jen's very comfortable on a treadmill. She's going to be able to, she knows how to push herself, but she's going to be able to get herself right up. You kind of have to know, like, this person has never done this before, so I need to support them a little bit more.
And then even prompting them, like before she started, I said, when you're done, when you feel like you can't go anymore, make sure that you're straddling the tread and using the handrails. And then I said that near the end, I don't know, the last 30 seconds, I think it was, like, when you're done, straddle and use the handrails to make sure that you're dismounting the assessment safely. But I think I just cooled it down. Or you walked on top of it. Yeah, you said you were going to stop, and I just stopped it, and yeah, that's what it was. But yeah, so depending on, there's a lot going on. I typically have one other person here with me doing this, running the treadmill manually. And then they're just kind of the catcher, watcher, while I'm kind of instructing like I would be doing this, but you know,
Yeah.
you knew what you were doing,
Correct.
so I was not too worried.
And other things to think about, which, you know, hopefully all of our students are thinking is, I better not have exercised to max yesterday, right? Or just making an exercise, or got no sleep, or, I mean, even morning compared to afternoon and body temperature, there's a lot of factors in it, so. I think not psyching your participant out by giving so many rules, but also. Being like, if you want this to be accurate, you know, here's the pre-steps that we need to follow, because there can be a lot of.
Yeah, this is a legitimate workout that you need to prepare for and recover from.
Yes, exactly. Even though it's only 10 minutes,
10 minutes.
like you pushed it hard, you pushed it to your max. What'd you think?
Well, now I'm doubting myself, but yeah.
From a number side, I would say you did. I would say you did. Yes, I would say you did.
I am also competitive and a person who wants to like beat the test, or beat myself.
Oh, I get that.
But I also like, Dr. O's comment about. People also might not know, if they haven't done a lot of variability training, that they do have 2 minutes left, right? Like they might be like, I'm really hurting, but then to hear somebody say, you know, like physiologically, your body still should be able to do this. I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Because when you're on there, I mean, it's like 10 seconds, 10 seconds, 10 seconds, but so I can see where you asked the question about like, is that a leading question? You know, are we in undue influence? But that helps. The numbers are telling me, hey, you still have 45 seconds that you can go. So then that helped me to be like, okay, I'm gonna trust my body.
And the other thing, Brandon, you want to consider is what are the signs and symptoms that she's showing me? I've heard like, I'm like, okay, you're near the end. Like, I'm not even gonna try and say you got one more just to try and get the competitive side of her out of it. I could hear like you're laboring and you're breathing. I'm gonna end this if you don't end this at the end of 10 minutes or at the end of the stage, because all the numbers that you were good.
So the verbal encouragement, and then, you know, if you didn't have a live stream, the sort of, you know, hard pumping music, this is okay. It's not, you're not unduly influencing the test, because there's an objective to the test, which is to get to a certain RER, or to achieve, you know, to get close enough that you can calculate V02 Max.
And I think when you look at the literature, there's a psychological piece to this wholeheartedly. In playing music versus not playing music, cheering versus not. If you're wanting to get that person to the absolute brink that they can possibly produce, you have to include those types of factors.
You need a minute.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I understand like the coercion side of things, but I'm also, if she said I'm stopping, I wouldn't say next stage, like we're doing, you know what I mean? So
right.
There's when the client tells you they're done, that's it.
Done.
If before that you see something that should say we need to stop, they're done. Right? No matter how competitive they are. And that's, I think, the key piece to that. How you get to those two places is kind of up to you. And I tell most students, like, it's hard.
Right. It's not
gonna feel good. And most assessments aren't gonna feel good, as we'll see, you know, in the future. The win date's a 30 seconds assessment. It sucks. Like, it's so hard. But you know, that's what it takes to tax that system. And so the point is you're trying to tax each of these systems, and getting them to their end is not gonna feel good. So, but it looks cool and it's fun. Like, I have a fun time getting the data, and when I am doing this, it like hurts so good, if that makes sense. Like, you feel like I did something, I now have data and I can now improve my performance.
Does this also measure any type of recovery, how fast you're recovering?
Yeah, so that's why I ran it for 2 minutes afterwards to see like, what does your recovery look like now? You did a pretty low active recovery. I probably would have had you a little bit faster than that. But yeah, from the recovery side of things, you had your heart rate go from 178, 179, and in 2 minutes you dropped to 127. So pretty nice recovery overall. If I was going to be running like just the training side of things, if you get that heart rate below 130, typically like doing high interval training,
Right.
you'd be good after 2 minutes to go again, theoretically, but I'm
Yeah.
you're done, so.
Does that automatically calculate ventilatory threshold?
Yeah, so you can look at that depending on if you're looking at like the ventilatory threshold 1 or 2. You can use that. You can also use like the ratio of that VCO over VO2 or VCO2 over VO2 or the RER value. So some data will look at like the RER of 1 as like the threshold point.
Right.
Because Jen hit that so high, that was like at 171, and her heart rate max is at 179. That could say one of two things. One, because you're aerobically trained, you have a high percentage of your VO2 peak already, right? So that could be part of it. The other part could be, you know, maybe there's a better test that's not going to push you in the chunks of 2.5, where we'll see that maybe earlier on or at a different heart rate. But from what I would say is I'd look and see where her like ventilatory threshold 1, ventilatory threshold 2 is, where the RER is, you kind of have a hybrid value of that. And if I had lactate threshold as well, like taking finger pricks at each 2-minute stage, I could put the 3 of those pieces together and say, around this heart rate is where you should be training either at or slightly above to try and improve. Just based off of RER though with this, I would say at like 170 is the heart rate should be training at. But when you look at that as a percentage of her heart rate max, that's like at 90%. So it's high, but if you've not seen changes and improvement because her heart rate's at 60% of her heart rate max, or at 50% of her heart rate reserve, then it may be that the intensity she's working at is too low, not eliciting that change because that threshold is actually higher up, like we saw from this data. So, yeah.
Right. And so you hinted at my next question, which is about blood lactate.
Sure.
So if you're trying to sort of determine, like lactate threshold, or so you're doing finger pricks every 2 minutes. Does that get logistically complicated?
So complicated.
Yeah, so it depends on the protocol, and it depends on like how often you want to sample, right? Yeah, in some of the literature, it's like at every stage. So if the stage is 3 minutes, then it's at 3 minutes. If it's every 2 minutes, it's at 2 minutes. Maybe sometimes it's every 30 seconds. It really kind of depends on what the stage is, but yeah, it complicates it for sure. I would hope in the future, and maybe this is already out there, but we just don't have access to it, that you could get a blood lactate more or less non-invasively that's continuous and credible, reliable, valid, right? All of that.
Right.
There probably is something out there. I would be shocked if there is. We don't have access to it, and because I don't want to deal with blood, I don't do it in here.
Yes.
And so I just use the data that we have from the ventilatory response. When you look at those two together, there's something called the anaerobic threshold that's kind of a hybrid of those pieces. You can do that, but it's also like, you have to understand that this is a little bit of an estimate. So it's kind of a still trial and error. Some people will respond better or not so good, depending on those different thresholds. So you may have to tinker with it a little bit for that individual to still improve. But generally speaking, if you find that ventilatory threshold or the lactate threshold and you work at or slightly above that for training, that will improve as a percent of the VO2 peak or VO2 max, depending on how many tests you've done. If you're performing, you want to be slightly below that threshold, because that's going to be your maximum ability to work aerobically for as long a period as time. So like if you're working with runners, you want to know where that threshold is as specific as possible for each of your runners. And then when they're performing, they work just below that because that's kind of the peak running.
Sweet spot.
Yeah, exactly. It's that sweet spot where they can meet the demand, no problem. But above that, they're going to fatigue quickly. Other people would call that the critical power. And so when we're looking at the aerobic critical power, that may be slightly different than the ventilatory or lactate threshold or anaerobic threshold. And so that critical power piece is one that you also want to determine because that's really going to be where the individual can maintain that for a long period of time. As long as they're still fueling, they're not gonna like bonk or have something bad happen to them from an energy production and usage side of things. So yeah, you'd use this to try and figure out those different pieces to hopefully set the person up for the Wheaties box or the podium or whatever it is, right? So
yeah. So would it be valid to take a single finger prick blood lactate at the end, or do you really need, and because you're estimating, you're sort of going back in time and trying to get that where that inflection point happens?
You could, yeah, but you're really looking for where that point is. You could take it at the end to just have like, here is the lactate accumulation that you had at the end. Great, but you really kind of want to see where that inflection point is.
Yeah.
And then utilize that for prescription.
Right.
But information is information. So you could do that, but it seems a little messy just for the end cap. So
got it.
I'm gonna see
Yeah, I can move this closer.
if I can move this closer. Yeah. So
You just want to roll the. Oh yeah.
You're gonna roll it? Okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay.
Quit following me.
I know. Okay, there we go. So you want to just show the screen?
Well, no, this thing's not in. It's like ET.
I know. Here. Let's do this. Sorry, we have to do these
Sorry,
hand motions
sorry,
to
people
Mhm.
watching this.
figure this out. So
We obviously don't do TikToks.
okay. Go. Good. Oh, it's because it can't do it when the base is
Yeah, we definitely can't be.
so the base
tired
isn't
of videos and-
solid right now. There we go. What's that? Come back. We're still recording this, so this is great. Okay, there we go. Okay, let's see. Oh, move too quick. Got me? Hey, little buddy. It's like it's a little human. Okay, so let's see if I'm going to take this over to this screen because I think that's going to be way better. Okay, so we have like a big TV piece here. I'll see if I can zoom in on this at all. And that's a really bad glare. I'm gonna turn the light off. Probably you can see. Okay, that is still not great, but let's see what we can do here. Yeah, we're gonna be able to see much of it.
I mean, we'll get mad at us if we.
I think it's gonna get mad, but
Yeah, you can see it now.
okay.
Come back, mushy little guy. So we are looking at. And this is, I don't know if it's flipped for you or not.
So, yeah, so we got basically this printout from the very start. So, you have the different baseline values, and then so when we're looking at this, you can see the warm up and then this exercise started. And then that first line, this gives you kind of an abbreviated version of this in every 30-second time cut. But from a data analysis side of things, there were every 15 seconds. It was taking an average of this. And so we can see that in liters per minute, that's gonna be on this column right here, the one right, to the right of time, that Jen's max was 3.28 liters per minute. So that would be the absolute oxygen consumption. We're not taking into consideration total body weight or anything like that. It's just in liters per minute. And then if we kind of look over at the next column, that one is based on Jen's weight in kilograms. How many milliliters per kilogram per minute are we consuming? And so she was able to have a maximum consumption of that 3.28, and the maximum oxygen consumption for the relative term, relative to her body weight, was 46.3. And so when we compare individuals to the same gender and height, or sorry, gender and age of Jen, she would be in the 99th percentile.
Yay.
Yeah, so I was like, this is super awesome. This is great. But we can also then see the values across. There you go. You're getting tired.
No, but there, now it's unblurry, okay.
Okay, gotcha. So we saw like her heart rate in beats per minute started off at 109 initially, and then jumped up within that first stage to around 150, and then had a slow progression from 150 up to 178, 179, right? Which the estimated heart rate max is 179. So this progression would say, okay, yeah, that initial stage, you were in that 150 heart rate range, which is great, like that's fine. When we compare that to the respiratory exchange ratio, which is this. Yeah, which is this column here. She was kind of hitting around that blend of carbs and fats at around 160 for her heart rate. But then at around 1, that was at 175. So again,
So it's not a very big, yeah.
Really high heart rate compared to where your heart rate max is.
I don't have a lot of room to play then.
No, and so like even let's just pretend that the threshold when you're looking at ventilatory threshold 1 and 2, sorry, I can do this. Yeah, when you're looking at ventilatory threshold 1 and 2, the lowest, according to the data, the lowest heart rate that we had that she was exercising was at 140. So if her, what do you know what your resting heart rate is?
58. 60.
Yeah, so you're almost bradycardic. Okay. So yeah, let's just say it's 60. Max heart rate is around 180, 179, right? So you'd be at a play of 130. Right. And so if we're at 50% of that, which would be 65 beats plus, it's like 125 would be like 50% intensity of the heart rate reserve for Jen at 125. That doesn't even like, that's somewhere between the first assessment of heart rate and the second one. Like it's not good enough because she's still like fat burning only. If you'd want like more weight to be lost and working at a higher intensity and burning more carbs, because weight wise, it takes less energy to burn a carb than it does to burn a gram of fat. Because a gram of fat has 9 kilocalories, it takes 9 kilocalories to burn 1 gram of fat compared to a gram of carbs, which is only 4. So when you look at this, you could say, okay, we want to burn more carbs. We want to get you in that like 170 heart rate. But if we look at that as a percentage of her heart rate reserve, we're in like the higher intensity already. And not a lot of people like to work high intensity. So knowing that can also inform your weight loss type of prescription, can inform, performance. Finding where those threshold pieces are will really be helpful so that the person meets the goals that they have. If you don't have this, then yeah, maybe 120, it's like, oh yeah, 50% of your heart rate reserve, that's like moderate intensity. Well, you're not really going to get better. And she's at basically that fat burning zone. She's at an RER of 0.7, 0.71. So she may have to exercise a lot to lose the similar number of grams of weight compared to someone working at a higher intensity, burning more carbohydrates, losing more weight overall, because again, a gram is a gram, but the energy it takes to utilize a carb gram is less than a fat gram. So yeah.
Right.
You
So
almost got a free lecture. Free class.
yeah, so at 0.8, where there's kind of a
The
mix
blend,
of
yeah.
fats, he's at around 158.
Oh, sorry.
Our heart rate was about 158. So if you did actually want to sort of like optimize fat oxidation in the
Yes.
training, keeping it aerobic, you know where that heart rate is.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You can utilize this to know where that oxidative portion would be. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought you were going for the screen. So yeah, you could utilize that and then say, this is the heart rate where you're having that RER is either a good blend, mainly fat, mainly carbs. But I would, especially in the current climate, people have so much going on, they don't have a lot of time to exercise. The number one piece people will use as an excuse, like, oh, I don't have time to exercise. So I would use this and say, well, you then have to have a heart rate for Jen at like 170, because that's where you're going to have the greatest response compared to the time that you have to invest. So, you know, you're not going to see a lot of weight loss changes or anything like that going to the gym and working at 125 beats per minute for your heart as the intensity. You know, so you'd want to make sure that whatever that intensity is, whatever the goals are, those are going to be congruent with each other and kind of working together. So yeah.